Well, since we're live, Dale, do you want to go ahead and just read the
Sure.
that opening statement? We can get that out of the way. Maybe John will pop up in between.
Will do. The Maryland Open Meetings Act requires public meetings to be open to the public and to be held in places reasonably accessible to individuals who would like to attend these meetings. We are in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic of uncertain duration that necessitates innovative approaches to ensure that government remains open and operating. We recognize that an accessible virtual meeting, which is the way this Ethics Commission meeting is being conducted, was not envisioned by the Open Meetings Act, but this meeting does include many of the alternate accessibility features that the Open Meeting Compliance Board and the courts have reviewed and approved, such as having a call-in phone number that allows anyone with a telephone to call and listen to the meeting, as well as being broadcast with video and audio on cable TV and on the web. In light of the serious health risks associated with public gatherings and in recognition of the governor's executive orders, we believe that under these circumstances, the public access provided by this technology makes the open portion of this virtual Ethics Commission meeting reasonably accessible to the public and will satisfy the open meeting requirements of the OMA. Here's John.
Thank you, Dale. Hey, John, good to see you.
Hey, good afternoon.
I guess we ought to take the roll, start things off. Gina, please.
Okay, Michael Botsaris.
Here.
Dale Kelperman.
Here.
Emerson Davis.
Here.
Vanessa Carter.
Here.
John Vandekamp.
Here.
Elizabeth Lewis.
Here.
Daniel Semick.
Here.
Robert Mansfield.
Here.
Thank you. Everyone's present.
Gina, I noticed that we had the meeting was posted on the website. Is there anyone from the public who was either called in or asked to have accessibility or is zooming in or anything like that?
No, the only registrant that we had was Dan and of course the Arundel TV, and that's it.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for showing up. We had thought that we might be able to do this in person some months ago when things were looking more promising, but the virus is resistant. So we might as well get started. Michael, do you want to walk us through the agenda, the open meetings part of the agenda, please?
Yeah, Dale, I'll get us started here. The minutes of April 13th have been posted on our website. Summary of the last meeting, we did elect our new chair, Dale, and that's official as of June 3rd. Lobbying updates, the numbers are up there. Website, lobbyist registration was updated as of September the 1st, so it's fairly current. We currently have 44 lobbyists representing 118 employers. Activity reports were due May 31st, and we did receive all of those. Financial disclosure statements, 2020 statements, they were due April 30th. We had a job getting a few of them filed, but I'm happy to report as of right now, we do have everybody filed and updated. I think we have one conflict of interest statement that was still outstanding. However, that gentleman called in and said that he had it and he was working on getting it to us. So I'm going to say that we are 100% complied with, and that's good. So we had to send 2 or 3 emails out to some people, and it really gets tiring after a while. And the last email I sent out was basically a threat saying we were going to have our meeting today at 4 o'clock, and that I was going to recommend complaints be filed against those individuals that could not get us their financial disclosure statements by our meeting time at 4 o'clock, and you'd be surprised the number that came in this morning. So anyway, we do have them, and that's good news. Ethics training, we've got 539 employees updated and trained, 96 board and commission members, and that process is going well. Gina did our fixed asset inventory back in July. We don't have that many fixed assets, but it's complete and done. And then we're going to move on to the resolution number 4221. That's the one, Emerson, that the county council brought up at their meeting last week, and I sent everyone a copy of that. Basically, they're appointing a woman by the name of Corrine Fitzgerald to replace you. She's a Republican. It's a county council choice. County council has approved the resolution, but it still has to go to the county executive for his signature. So once he signs off on it, Ms. Fitzgerald will be our new commission member, and I will reach out to her and welcome her and introduce her to the Ethics Commission. Gina will send her the normal pamphlet and folder and binder of information and get her up and running. I do recall seeing her resume, but I can't recall exactly what her experience was, but I do know it was fairly impressive. So I'm happy to have Ms. Fitzgerald come aboard when she is appointed by the county executive. And Emerson, that'll mean you're off after 8 years and
8.5.
eight.
But who's counting?
8.5 years. And how many years as chair? Like 4 or something?
I think it was like 5 or 6.
Yeah, I mean, I personally want to thank you for everything you've done for me, because you were the chair when I came on board. First, when I came on as a commission member, you were very kind enough to help me with the introductions and get me started. And then when the opportunity came up and you needed a executive director, and I put my name in the hat, and you were kind enough to support me. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate the help that you've given the commission since the 8.5 years that you've done it, longer than me, anyone else on this commission, I believe. And your experience and thoughtfulness is certainly going to be missed. So don't be surprised if I give you a call every once in a while just to get your opinion on something.
No problem. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Emerson.
Thank you.
Second, here,
Thank you very
here.
much. Appreciate all your help and your wise guidance.
Thank you.
Always wise.
All right. Let's move on to legislative bill number 6721. That's the one where the commission's requested to add the legislative council position to the list of financial disclosure filers. I thought this was going to be just a routine matter, and we got Ms. Sarah Lacey to introduce it. That all went well. And then I went to the meeting last Tuesday, I guess it was. And I thought there would be a few questions, but I thought there wouldn't be any hesitancy. But as you know, there was an amendment filed by Councilman Volke to try to get all attorneys in the Office of Law required to file disclosure statements. That met with a lot of resistance, both from the Office of Law and from county council members. I also expressed our concern that the commission had questions about it, and although we didn't come up with a formal opinion, that my sense was there was some concern about that and that it was not necessary. So that amendment was defeated at the council meeting, so that's not going forward. But they also put the bill on hold. If anyone saw the video or watched the council meeting, they seem to have a lot of concern about one of their employees being required to file a financial disclosure statement. I don't know why. We had talked about it before. They had asked us, who else we thought may be required to file. I think we talked about their secretary filing, someone else, and we decided that was not necessary at the time. And now they are somewhat hesitant to approve it. And the gist I got was that even though we did talk to Ms. Lacey prior to filing or asking it to be filed, that they wanted to know, or some of the council members wanted to know, why we didn't come to them first and get their opinion and come up with a solution to the issue, maybe short of having to file a financial disclosure statement. I tried to explain as briefly and professionally as I could that the commission is mandated to enforce the ethics code, and this commission thought that following a financial disclosure statement from the legislative council position, which is a new position, it would be an important tool for us to be able to do our job. I pointed out that that position is unique in the fact that the person or the attorney in that position is allowed to maintain a private practice, unlike any other attorney in the county office of law or other attorney that I know of that's working, for the county on a full-time basis. So after some discussion, they wanted to put it on the table for their work session, which is going to occur tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It's going to be a Zoom session. I've been invited to attend, and I will attend. I don't know what else I'm going to say to them other than the fact that this commission still believes that a financial disclosure statement from the legislative council position is an important tool that we would like implemented by way of legislation. The administration supported it, and there were only a couple of council members who really, I think, had questions about it. And I really think their most serious concern was the fact that they thought we were trying to do this without talking to them first. I don't know why, but that's the sense that I got. Even though we didn't do that. And I did have some notes on the meeting here. Yeah, their concern was why didn't we discuss it with them first, which in fact we actually did. They also kept mentioning that this was their employee. And I tried to point out that this was a county employee, not specifically their employee. I mean, they appointed this person, they appointed the position, but it is a county position. The Ethics Commission is mandated with enforcing the ethics laws to protect the citizens of Arundel County against all forms of conflict from all county employees, and this county employee position falls under the same category. But again, they seem to have some proprietary interest in that position and having the final say on what that person does or doesn't do. And that's pretty much it. Unless anyone else has any other thoughts, I'm going to go to the session tomorrow. They also asked that the chair of the commission address them. And they asked why the chair didn't, I guess with me, why the chair didn't come to them to talk about the issue. And I don't recall any instance where the chair went with county in front of the county executive with the executive director to talk about any particular issue that was before it or legislation that was before it. But I said that I'm sure that Dale would be happy to participate in any work session you have. And I don't know whether, Dale, did they send you the invitation?
I haven't seen anything yet, Michael.
Okay. I did give them your email address and name, so if they want you there tomorrow morning, they will send you an invitation. If they don't, I assume that they won't. So that's where it's at. Yeah, Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to bring up two other things that I remember hearing. One was some council member, maybe more than one, was asking why a financial disclosure statement rather than conflict of interest, which that office doesn't do either at this point. And Michael, you addressed that question, that it was an additional level of oversight. The other question was, we have the county council, we have other staff who are involved in helping to develop legislation. So why single out this particular person? And I just want to add that's a couple of other things I remember hearing about questions they had raised with you.
Yeah, they did raise those questions. And I think I tried to point out that there's an important distinction, the fact that this position requires an attorney and it allows that attorney to continue to practice law in the same field where they're going to be involved in drafting legislation and coming up with wording for legislation. So there obviously is the potential for conflict or the appearance of conflict if that person has a client who may have an interest in a particular matter that the county council is considering for legislation. Not that that would happen. I hope it would not happen, but the potential is there. And I think that our request for a financial disclosure statement was reasonable and for good cause. So we'll go forward tomorrow and see where it goes. And then I think they're going to have it come up for another vote at the next meeting. I think it's September 20th or 21st, sometime the following week. Unless someone has any ideas what else I should say to the county council, there's not a whole lot else to talk about here at the present time.
But I think it's a little disappointing that they're making this issue our employee versus county employee. I mean, there's a lot of county employees in that position. I mean, including you, Michael. The ethics commission is the body that hired you, but yes, you are a county employee. So, you know, it's like saying the ethics commission has the power to say, we don't see the necessity of you filing an FDS. There would be no difference because
Right.
you were hired by the ethics commission. Same way their legislative liaison council is hired by them, but still it's a county employee. And I think it's a weak argument to say that's our employee versus county employee. And I don't know how that could be, you know, if that could be emphasized anymore during your discussion, that issue.
Yeah, I tried to address that issue with them and noting to them that our responsibility was to all county employees and all county residents, and it really doesn't matter what the position is or who did the hiring or who did the appointing.
Right.
That once it becomes, you know, once the legislation sets forth who should file, and we believe this person should file, and the commission has the right and the ability and actually the duty to recommend changes to the ethics code when it feels it's necessary. And this is a case where we came up as a commission and felt it was necessary. Doesn't mean they have to do it, obviously, but again, they haven't presented a valid or good reason why they wouldn't. Kidding.
So one other thing is that maybe it was under the discussion of the Volke amendment, but I think you've already brought that up to the commission as well. Only, I think, 2 members of the county attorney are required to file a FDS, and that's the head of the office and the deputy. And that came up at the discussion during the Volke amendment. I think, and the thing is, and you pointed this out, Michael, was at some point that the county council attorney did not exist when the charter, portion of the charter was passed that made those 2 positions to be required to file FDS. And one could argue that for the county council, the only attorney is the top attorney for that body within the county. And under an equivalency basis, that would be one of the many reasons that office holder should hold that, should have that requirement. I mean, there was that question about whether a conflict of interest statement alone would that suffice? But I don't think it came out directly that way, but they did ask for the distinction. You did mention that for good reason that there's a reason to do that, and that's to make it more oversight considering the level of gravity of that office.
Yeah, and I suspect if they do come back with another suggestion, it's going to be to change it to a conflict of interest statement only. But I don't think, Gina, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is only for board and commission members that conflict of interest statements are required for certain board and commission members, correct?
That's correct.
There
are no employees.
So it doesn't really, and that was to keep it, you know, to keep the burden low for these board and commission members who are involved in the function of county government to the extent that the legislative council position is. I'm sure they've reviewed the conflict of interest statement form as well as the financial disclosure statement form, and they may have more questions about that issue. I don't know, but it seems to be where it's heading right now. All right, let's move on. And again, I'll update everyone after the work session tomorrow morning, let you know where things stand or what concerns or questions that I addressed. And then I'll let you know the firm date when it's going to be up for vote again. And I don't know whether it's worth having commission members, if it's still going to be a fight, whether it's worth having commission members attend that county council and testify in favor of the bill. What do you think, Dale, Emerson? I mean, that's never been done before, but I mean,
Well, I think we ought to, let's see what happens at the working session tomorrow before we take that up. I'm not sure that would particularly be helpful. I mean, you've already explained to them that the commission supports this bill. I don't know whether you've told them, were we unanimous in support of this bill? I think we were.
yes.
Yes.
We were.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know if you've told them it was unanimous, but you might want to just point that out. I mean, I don't know how our testimony would enhance the issue in any way other than what you've already told them. I think we would wind up simply repeating the arguments that you've made, that Emerson and Dan have pointed out, and we've all been aware of. It might, I don't know what the confidentiality requirements are, Michael, but it might be useful to point out to them that this was not something that we came up with out of thin air, that it's the result of a complaint that was filed with us. I don't know if you can say complaint, but you can tell them that the issue was brought to our attention by a member of the public.
Yeah, I did let them know it resulted from an inquiry. I didn't give any more details than that, and I don't think that they would be entitled to any more details than that right now. But I did let them know that it was because they wanted to know why all of a sudden we came up with this idea.
Yeah.
They wanted to know whether it was some other county's regulation, whether the state had a similar regulation, whether it was a best practices type of issue. And I explained to them that it resulted from an inquiry, and the commission felt that it would have been helpful to have that information, and that since this was a new position and had not been considered before, that we considered it, and without giving any more details on the inquiry where that went, that we felt it was good, that it was important. Whether or not any other county had the similar position as this or not, whether or not any other county ethics code has this provision or not, it's really irrelevant as to what this commission thinks is necessary to enforce its ethics code on behalf of its citizens. So I tried to make that clear, and I'll do it again tomorrow, and we'll see what happens.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
As far as I can remember, I don't think that a commission member has ever gone to testify on behalf of something that we've discussed. Is that true, Gina?
Yeah, I don't recall any time.
Okay.
Director just goes.
Right. And I guess I would be hesitant to start that precedent.
Right.
That whenever there's a question, they can call one of us or the chair to come and testify or whatever. So.
Good point.
I agree with you, Vanessa. Michael, wondering if it's worth reaching out to Ms. Shewitt and asking her for permission to disclose to the county council in connection with this legislation the inquiry that brought this up, so that we can tell the county council that she was advertising on our website that she was legislative counsel.
Okay. We probably should discuss that on this open meeting section. But
okay. Well,
that is something that we could possibly ask her if we get some more pushback. Let me see what happens tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And if I feel it's necessary that we go to that extent, then I'll get in touch with the commission and we'll make a decision whether or not we want to make that request or not of Ms. Shewitt. I hope it doesn't come to that, but
Michael, did you also point out that part of the reason why we filed this or asked for this is because we got kind of a preliminary approval from the chairperson of the county council, if I'm
Yes,
not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, going into this, it looked like we had the support of the leadership of the council to do this.
That's the first thing we did. We inquired with
Right.
the parent of the administration, and we inquired with Sarah Lacey, the
Right.
council chairperson.
And she kind of gave us her blessing.
She said, I'll be happy to introduce this.
Right.
And I'll be happy to, get my other council members' feelings if for some reason they had a concern. And never, ever did we hear any concern. The only concern we had was maybe you should add another employee of ours who was a secretary, maybe we should add that person. And we thought about that and we decided that it wasn't necessary. That was the only comment or question that they had ever come back with.
Right.
Why I was surprised at the hesitancy at the meeting on Tuesday. Kidding.
Dan.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the questions that they, maybe more than one council member raised was why, when the Ethics Commission presents a bill before the council, don't they provide the rationale for it? And that seemed to be obviously with the questions they were asking. Now to us, all of the reasons seemed pretty darn evident. And we thought it would be very evident to them that it sounds like a pretty darn good idea, just to have more transparency and more disclosure. Anyway, that was one of the questions. But I wanted to add one last thought on this. Another argument could be, we need to follow the state protocols at a minimum for ethics decisions. And one of the things that the state requires, maybe this is more so in the executive branch, but it's in the when you go to the ethics website for the state, they said, who has to file a financial disclosure statement with the state? And they say it's employees at a certain level and make a certain salary level classification, number one. And along with that, their level of responsibility. And I think this is a case where the level of responsibility, the only attorney for the county council has a large amount of responsibility. And it just seems like a very evident decision to us to be having that requirement for that attorney's office.
Great, we'll see where it goes tomorrow.
You think it would help if we got support from the state ethics commission on their opinion of her filing?
If we're faced with more hesitancy and tomorrow, maybe that's an issue we should look at. I don't know what the state would do. I could ask their general counsel to weigh in on the issue, maybe. But they're going to say it's up to the local ethics commission.
Yeah. But if we had some kind of support from them, I mean, I know we can't control it, but if we had kind of support from them saying that they thought that it was a good idea or not a bad idea anyway, that it might carry a little more weight with it.
Well, they ultimately will have to approve it at the next review of our law because it'll be a change in the law. I can't imagine that they would find it not substantially similar to their law or some reason invalid. Whether they would give a preliminary approval or a preliminary recommendation, I don't know. I could check with them. Again, let's see where it goes tomorrow morning, and then I'll touch back and we'll make a decision on what our next course of action will be. Alrighty, moving on. The next item on the agenda is the review of the ethics code, so the general overall review of the ethics code. And I think that Dale raised this issue a couple of months ago. The Ethics Commission is required to review the code over time and make any recommendations that it thinks are needed or should be in place based on its attempts to enforce and uphold the ethics code over the past number of years. And we did do an ethics code revision back in 2016, 17, I think it was, maybe 18. I sent you the summary of the code changes, which was the major code changes that we did back then. It was during the SHU administration. I do remember that.
Yes, it was.
And at that time, the administration had a couple of changes they wanted to make. They had asked us what changes did we want to make. We came up with some changes. We had asked, I'm sure the county council got involved too, because they were overhauling the entire code, not just the ethics commission or the ethics code. We did do that process a couple of years ago, and we came up with those changes, and they were implemented and put into law per those bills that I sent you copies of. So I guess Dale's thoughts were, although Dale, I know you weren't part of that process, that maybe it's a good time that we do that again. And I don't know if you had any particular suggestions or recommendations, or how you think we should go about that process this time.
Well, I circulated a couple of suggestions that I had for us to think about anyway, not necessarily to vote on today or anything like that, just to start the discussion. And I asked if anybody else had any ideas or thoughts on amendments to circulate them in advance of the meeting. I didn't see any others. Dan, I know, had sent in some comments about my suggestions. But anyway, the two things that I had, since I've been on the commission about 2 years now, the two issues that I thought we ought to at least think about. One is in section 74106, section C. This has to do with the complaint process. I have not, since I've been on a commission, it's been since June of 2019, we have not had a complaint that has gone through the process that I recall anyway. And I don't know, Emerson, if you can speak to how many times that you actually went through the formal complaint process since you've been here, but I suspect that it's been few and far between.
We've had one in the last 8 years. It was with, which bank was it, Gina, the bank, Severn Bank?
Yes, with the liquor board member.
Yeah, with the liquor board, yeah. It went through a complete investigation. We issued fines. And that was the only one that went to a full, complete investigation with fines involved.
I think that one even went to the circuit court.
It did. Yeah, it went to the Court of Special Appeals, and it was upheld. That's the only one.
Okay, well, I'm not sure whether this particular point has deterred people from filing complaints, but there is a provision that says, on request of the respondent, the Ethics Commission at any time shall disclose the identity of the complainant to the respondent. So basically, if somebody submits a complaint to us about ethical misconduct on the part of somebody else, the target has the right to ask us for the name and identification of the complainant. And I'm not really sure that there's any value to this other than intimidation. I think anybody who is thinking about filing a complaint with the Ethics Commission and looks at the code and sees that his or her name is going to be disclosed, like it or not, to the person about whom they are complaining, he or she is complaining, I think that's intimidating. And I think it discourages people from coming forth with a complaint that they might be aware of. Now, once the complaint process begins, if that person winds up being a witness at a hearing, of course, his or her identity will be disclosed to the respondent. The respondent and his or her counsel have a chance to confront and cross-examine and ask questions of the complainant. But if it doesn't get to the stage where there's any actual proceeding, then there's really no reason why, in my opinion anyway, the respondent should know who the complainant was. And it only undermines the ability of the public to come forward, I think. So let's start with that one, see what everybody else, I don't know if anybody else has any opinion on it one way or another. But so my suggestion would be to eliminate that provision. I have given thought to changing the language to give the Ethics Commission the discretion to make the disclosure as opposed to having it mandatory. But I still think that whoever is a complainant thinks that their identity might be disclosed, it's still going to discourage them from coming forward. And so since I don't see how it adds anything to the procedure, at least at that stage, I don't see where it contributes to anything that helps us resolve the issue. And since if there is a proceeding that the respondent gets to cross-examine the complainant, that satisfies due process and fundamental fairness in my mind. I don't see why we should have this provision in here. So I'll open the floor to comments and ideas about that one. Dan.
Thanks, Dale. I think this is I like this suggestion and recommendation. I think it goes farther than any that I know of within the state when I start looking at other counties. But I really don't know that much about the other counties. It gets back to we're unique, we're Arundel, we have to do things we think are right. What I can say is that you just answered my question in my email about the due process part, confronting an accuser. And what you just said also reminded me that we've had some cases already in the little over a year that I've been on the commission. Not that we've had anything referred to us, but we know that there is an avenue for a whistleblower hotline that goes through the executive branch, maybe through the attorney's office, I believe, county attorneys, and they may refer things to us. And if we don't have this provision, are we then required to disclose something that otherwise in a normal whistleblower process, you are trying to protect the whistleblower? So I think it adds to that we need to be able to have this capability. I do know that the state, in the case of the State Ethics Commission, if they get a complaint, the complainant's name is of course known by the State Ethics Commission. They do not proactively tell the target, hey, somebody just called and said this about you or made a complaint about you. What happens in the state is the target, let's call it, the official who may be the subject of the complaint, has access to a database and they can go into it and find out that way. But it's not like they're automatically told immediately somebody is saying something about you may not like. So we would be going beyond the state level in that respect, and that's okay. That's all I have to say at this point.
Let me point out something else that I mentioned in my email, but I neglected to just mention a few minutes ago. There is a provision in the code that's designated as protection for complainants, section 74-109, that basically says retaliation is prohibited. You can read it for yourselves when you have some time, but basically it's directed towards county officials who retaliate against subordinates who file complaints with us. Obviously, proving retaliation would be very difficult. I'm sure somebody in an official capacity would be able to come up with some other pretext reason for, penalizing somebody who has made a complaint, just say it's poor performance or whatever, come up with some other rationale. But also the retaliation provisions really don't address just members of the public who might fear their taxes are going to be increased, their property taxes are going to go up, their zoning request is going to get denied, or some other county action is going to be taken against them as a result of their complaint. So there is some provision in here to protect complainants, but it wouldn't be really necessary if we don't. I mean, you still want to have them, of course, but I don't think that is I don't think that gives comfort to anybody who is considering filing a complaint with us about some public official. Vanessa, did you have a point?
Yeah, I had a question. It's been my experience that what happens a lot is that if somebody has a complaint, they tend to CC the world on the complaint.
Right.
I'm not sure how that would be affected by what you're proposing.
Michael had also suggested to me at one point when I first raised this that it might wind up becoming a fodder during political campaigns. You file a complaint and then tell everybody, oh, there's this complaint against so-and-so. That's true. That's a risk. I think the remedy for that is to find that, first of all, to dismiss the complaint as quickly as we can if it has no merit. Keep in mind that the complainant still has to identify himself or herself with us, and the complaint has to be under oath. So somebody filing a false complaint just to attack a political opponent is subject to perjury prosecution, for example, or is filing a false statement or interfering with a government agency or whatever other criminal statutes might apply or civil actions that might apply. And so, you know, I think that is a risk that we take. I think the person could still do that now, Vanessa, right?
Yeah.
Daniel.
Yeah, to your point, Vanessa, I've also wondered whether, so we're seeing a certain segment of society that is providing complaints, those who want to be known to the world and who they are. So maybe we're missing out on another group of complainants who are intimidated or unwilling to make a complaint because of fear of retaliation. That's all.
Let me point out that we do receive anonymous complaints.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Michael.
And we investigate those just as fully as we would a complaint that has a name on it. And then we make the determination of whether we are going to pursue the matter, in which case it would become a complaint from the Ethics Commission itself. Right. And we are allowed to file our own complaints. So often, you know, we do get complaints from people who do not want to be involved. They don't even want to testify. They don't want to be called as a witness. They don't want to do anything. And we don't simply throw those in the trash can. We investigate them. And if there is substance there, then the commission as a whole will move forward with its own complaint. And the process would proceed without an official complainant other than the commission and its investigation. So I think that that is some protection for the public for filing an anonymous complaint. And the other issue that I talked about, Dale, was that the political requirement. You'll notice that come election year, that's when you're going to see the complaints, whether they're legitimate, not legitimate. You're going to see them start to come in 6 months before the election, and they won't stop until after the election. And you know, some of them will be anonymous, some of them will be with someone's name on them. But it helps us to know when those ones that have someone's name on them, you know, who that particular person is. And I say that the person who the complaint is filed against has the right to know who that person is. Whether there's any retaliation or not, you know, I don't know. Like I said, there's whistleblower statutes, there's all kinds of protections. And I don't really know what the state law is on this either, because if we diverge too much from what the state law is, then this could be seen as not substantially similar and not be approved by the state if we somehow took out the disclosure requirement, which is a pretty big requirement. And I suspect the reason the state left it in there was for political reasons. So, but it's all worth further discussion and looking into and figure out ways to word it so that we can come up with something that's maybe not complete anonymity, but somewhere in between.
I'm not suggesting anonymity. I'm not suggesting anonymity. I want to make that clear. The person still has to file, sign their name, and have it be under oath. The question is whether we disclose that identity to the respondent at the respondent's request. So it would still be a written complaint signed by someone and subject to the perjury prosecution. And I also want to ask you, Michael, about the anonymous complaint, because I'm looking at the filing requirements of the complaint, and it says it shall be signed and under oath. And so I'm wondering why we even entertain anonymous complaints given that provision. And I'm not objecting to that, but maybe we need to change that to allow for anonymous complaints. Do we want to do that?
We could. I mean, the way it is now, it just means we don't have a duty to investigate an anonymous complaint. We can dismiss it on its face without going through any investigative procedure if the complaint doesn't set forth, a cause of action that's sufficient to investigate further. I think it just gives us more leeway in deciding when and how to dismiss a complaint, or when and how to proceed with further investigation and entertaining our own complaint. Maybe if we put more language in there saying that the Ethics Commission will consider an anonymous complaint in some fashion, I don't know whether that helps address your concerns that people are being dissuaded from filing complaints based on that. But from what I've seen in the years that I've been here, and I'm sure Emerson probably has, he's been here longer than anybody, people still file complaints whether they put their name on it or not, it's probably a 50-50 issue whether they put their name on it or not. Go ahead, Emerson.
Emerson.
And I think what we're getting caught up in with this anonymity is we're splitting hairs on terminology. And in the past, Michael's correct. You can classify received anonymous complaints, and maybe that's not the right terminology. In the past, we have received information that might not rise to the level of a complaint, but if we receive information, the commission has a right to go forward with that. So I think we're splitting hairs on terminology here, whether it's just receiving information that the commission assesses and decides whether to move forward with, or do we take it to a formal complaint? And even without a complainant, the commission has a right to file their own formal complaint based on information received. Yeah. And I can only think of one case since I've been here is that the commission wanted to move forward, but we couldn't because the complainant did not want to file a formal complaint. And so you're right, Dale, it has to be done under oath and things like that, but it's not really accepting anonymous complaints. I would more classify as we're receiving information that somebody thinks is inappropriate behavior, we're assessing it, and we're deciding what to do with it. So I don't really buy, I question the terminology that we accept anonymous claims. So Michael's correct.
Okay.
We do that all the time.
Whether you call it an anonymous complaint or information, what
Right.
about the issue is really whether we notify the respondent at his or her request about the identity of the complainant and whether that has a deleterious effect on the public submitting complaints to us. I mean, if we don't think that's an issue, if you don't think that there are people out there who are concerned and are not filing complaints because they're afraid of their identity being disclosed, then we don't have to do anything, I guess. I mean, it's one of those things where you can't judge what's out there because we don't, it's one of these unknown unknowns, I guess, to quote somebody, Rumsfeld or Cheney, I don't know which one of those guys. We don't know if there are complaints out there that are not being filed because the complainant is concerned about his or her identity being disclosed.
But they can still do that, whether they remain anonymous or they're just passing on information. They don't have to tell us who they are. They just give us the information and we assess where we go with it.
Right, but Emerson, if
Since
somebody,
they remain anonymous.
I don't know that the public knows that, number one, and anybody who is considering filing a complaint is going to look at the ethics code and see that the complainant, the respondent is entitled to the identity of the complainant. So I understand what you're saying. You're right. There might be people who just pass the information on. But then anybody who's actually looking into this ethics code is going to see that their identity is probably going to be disclosed to the respondent. So
my one last remark on it is history has shown that we have received those phone calls all the time. We haven't heard of anybody that has, read the ethics code and said, hey, based on the ethics code, I'm not going to. They call, they usually talk to Michael, they usually get information. He gives them his best judgment on it, and then we go forward from there. But based on history and the number of complaints that we have gotten without identifying who they are, I would say the system is kind of working the way it is.
But you don't know how many people haven't complained because they're afraid of their identity being disclosed. I mean, that's the whole point.
That's true. Right.
And we don't know, and there's no way to find that out, I don't think. Dan.
There's no way to suss that out, though. How do you figure out,
Right.
how many people have not because of that? There's, unless you send out a survey or something,
Yeah.
That's a question pretty hard to answer.
Mhm.
Right. It is.
Dan, did you have something else?
Yeah, I think based on the conversation, Emerson, and your comments in the last few minutes, Dale, whether there's one category, anonymous information provided to the commission that the commission may still choose to look at. And then there are complaints, which are formal, under oath, that sort of thing. And the respondent or the target, whatever, the official who's been complained about gets to know who made that complaint. I don't know if there's a third category, is another way to put it, but for those people who want to provide information, but give their name or contact information, can they be anonymous? Because the problem with, and I've seen this with whistleblower hotlines across states, across the country, they often, and I know we're dealing with something other than whistleblower complaints, but it's a very hotlines. That's a little bit different category, but there is a similarity here. With whistleblower hotlines, most of them say, if you give someone a chance for anonymity, if you provide the information to us and give us your name, there's an advantage for that institution examining that information. We can get back to you and find out if there's something else you should be telling us. This is the problem with whistleblower hotlines that inspector generals across the country have. A complaint could be, or what they receive is very vague sometimes in an anonymous complaint, and they need to get back to that individual if they're willing to provide more information. And sometimes they're not if they don't have some kind of protective cover.
Well, I'm going to suggest that we table this idea for the time being. So, I mean, everybody's had a chance now to understand at least what the issues are that are percolating here, and we can think about it a little more. And maybe next time we get back together, we can reach the point where we can come to some decision about whether we want to go forward with this idea or not. And let me address the second issue that I had raised earlier, and that's really a question of transparency of the records that we get from filers. We're supposed to maintain them, and similarly, we're supposed to, on the request of the individual whose statement was examined or copied, forward to that individual a copy of the record prepared pursuant to Section B. So, in other words, the financial disclosure statements and conflict statements that we get, that Gina keeps, I guess, in a desk drawer somewhere or a filing cabinet.
They're here in the file room.
Yeah. In order for somebody to have access to them, they have to come in and actually request it, and then that person's identity and what they ask for is provided to the filer. And my idea was to try to get this on our website, as opposed to just having paper sitting in Gina's desk.
Wow.
Having it on a website would make it available to everybody at a click, so that the public, I mean, the whole point of the financial disclosure statements is to convince the public that the county executives and officials and employees are putting the public interest first. And there's no real sense of having a public financial disclosure statement that's not really public. So I'm suggesting that we figure out a way, and the cost would enter into it, of filing these financial disclosure statements going forward, not historical. We don't want to incur the expense of gathering years of records and scanning them. But in the future, having these available on our website so that anybody on the public can look up the financial disclosure statement that the county executive has filed or the legislative council has filed, if we ever get to that point. Of course, that would mean that we would not be able to necessarily provide the filer with the identity or information about the person who has examined the file, but I really don't see any reason why the filers should be notified that John Doe has come in to look at your financial disclosure statement. I think that this is probably a product of the State Ethics Commission. I think they have a similar provision, although they now are online. I think you can check financial disclosure statements if you sign up. You create an account or something like that online with your name and identification information, and then you can access the financial disclosures that the state employees have filed. And I can see, I don't know what the cost involved is in the IT department to do that, but I could see that being a reasonable way of accommodating the public's interest in getting access to this information, and still, being accountable to everyone. So that's the idea. So I'll open the floor to comments or ideas.
Dylan, I'd like to have a few things to say about that. We live in a very active period of cybercrime. Who's going to want to see what you've got out there? An opponent. I find it hard to believe that someone out of the goodness of his or her heart is going to say, well, I'd like to see one of our financial statements. I mean, there's a purpose for that. And I believe each of us have the right to know what that is, because there can be consequences. That's a gut feeling. I don't think it serves. If they want it, they can call Gina and we can be notified about it. At least we know about it. Right now, that opens it up to all kinds of things. I go back to identity theft. It's rampant. There's fraud going on everywhere. One detail can lead to something else, which can lead to all kinds of things that we read about every day. So I'm not sure that's a really good idea, but I understand your purpose thing. Okay.
Well, John, of course, anybody who is motivated to do something can come in and ask Gina for your information, and they can write it down and then do whatever they're going to do anyway. So it's just it's a question of access in the first instance. The notification provision, I understand what you're talking about. Emerson?
And obviously I'm not going to be here to be affected by it in the future, but I think it's going to have a huge adverse effect on volunteers. We already have, we have an underlying feeling from volunteers, board members, commission members on the FDS, and including I understand, just like John said, I understand the need for the FDS. But for somebody to be able to sit back in their house and click a mouse and find out where I live, my phone number, the value of my house, where my spouse is employed, by sitting back and clicking, a mouse, me as a volunteer, that kind of might put me over the line where it's like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, opposed to somebody, and you're right, Dale, literally has to go out of their way, make a concerted effort to go into the ethics commission office, sign a paper and get that information. And at least I know who's looking me up. So, and I don't see a way to divide this between employees and volunteers. But as a volunteer, I would say, no, thank you. If somebody's going to gather that much information on me just because I'm a volunteer by sitting back and clicking a mouse, I probably would say, no, thank you. And based on the history of the FDS, as Michael could attest to, and certainly Gina, with volunteers on different commissions and boards, I think it's going to be a huge issue, but I don't know how to separate it out.
Anybody else have any ideas or such comments? Daniel?
Yeah, I think that that there's some good comments made about this on both sides, and generally I'm in favor of it. And I guess this is my chance to plug one of the amendments to your proposal, which is an interpretation of the commission, its members themselves. So we as commission members, if we want to look at a financial disclosure statement of somebody, it may come up during one of the examinations based on a complaint that we get, that we, the commission, get. And some members may want to delve into a little bit more what's on the financial disclosure statement in that case. I see there are two ways of interpreting this, and my understanding is it's been interpreted that we as commission members, our information would have to be provided as well. I think another way to read the code is that as members of the commission has access to it. We are the commission, that we would not have to disclose that information to the respondent, to the person whose information they're looking at. I don't want to diverge too much. I just wanted to add that, and maybe we can discuss that at another time. But I do see, I'm basically in favor of making it easier access. I agree with what you said, Dale, about the state. I think that they do withhold some information. Maybe the home address of individuals, I think, is withheld. I'm not too sure. I haven't looked at that lately, but that's all for now.
Anybody else have anything to add to the good of the order?
Dale, just
Yeah.
briefly, putting it on the website with no restrictions or not behind any firewall is just, I think, a bad idea. It just opens up the information to phishing attacks by very complicated computer ID theft experts who write a program that trolls the internet for private information, and to have it pop up on some website is just not a good idea. The state resolves that issue by putting it behind a firewall and requiring registration. And I think that is probably a good idea, that you don't have access to it simply by clicking, but you got to register. You got to go through an authentication process. You have to confirm your email address so they know who's taking the information. And I believe they also have the requirement that they will disclose to the person whose records are reviewed who that person who registered is. And I think that, going that direction would be the most feasible, and trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. The problem is, I don't know if our IT department can handle that. We've gotten to the point now where we've got them all on PDFs, and we will supply them to people electronically after they provide the necessary identification information that we request. But to have them put up on the website directly is something that I'd have to go back and talk to our IT department about and find out exactly what kind of firewall they would have to build to protect it from all the crazy phishing schemes that are out there that try to gather information on individuals for no good purposes. So we got to balance both of those somehow. But I do understand your concern about more disclosure and an easier way to get it, but it really isn't that difficult to call Gina, email her the form that we require, and she emails them back the financial disclosure statement. I mean, that's fairly simple. Everybody has a record of what took place, and the person's notified. I don't think that dissuades someone from looking at financial disclosure statements. I think it just dissuades fraud, and I'd be very seriously concerned about fraud.
Mm-hmm. Emerson, John, what do you guys think of what Michael has said about creating a firewall and having registration and getting electronic?
That's reasonable. That's a reasonable improvement. Yes.
Emerson, you're shaking.
As long as there's a record
Yeah.
No one is sitting back fishing, clicking a mouse key, finding out where my spouse works. I think that's reasonable. But as long as there's enough protections put in place, anything could be disclosed at that point or accessed at that point if there's enough protection. First thing what's going on, you see what's going on with the credit card companies, and then you wonder, is there ever enough protection?
Well, then you're going to have decent artificial intelligence to detect phishing as it comes in,
Right.
to whatever site is put up with firewalls. So you're back in the world of AI and IT, and
right. They're only as good as
the jungle out there.
Everything is only as good as the IT department.
Right.
Yes,
That's the credit cards.
that's right.
And that's the question. Does these IT have that capability for that kind of information be protected? That's something we just don't know at this point.
Right.
The bad guys do.
Of course.
We really don't know that, and
No.
just based on my experience, I don't think we're up there with the first class cybersecurity experts. They do a good job of protecting websites and emails, but as far as defending against some sort of a phishing attack, I mean, you see the professional credit card companies that spend billions of dollars trying to protect your data, and then all of a sudden you get a notice in the mail saying, oops, your data may have been disclosed to some foreign entity. Are we going to have to do that? Are we going to have to send out notices to every single person if we find that there's been some breach in the system? I hope not.
Well, Michael, let me ask you if you would undertake at least to check with the county IT people and ask them to confer with the state IT people to see what the state has done in terms of the firewall and to see what's feasible. This is not to say that nobody's making any decisions about anything, but just to provide us all with the information about what's possible here. Even while the stuff is on paper, people can take advantage of it and disseminate it, and this is just electronically getting it protected as best we can. We'll see what happens with that.
Okay, I'll follow up with our IT department and see what they have to say about.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so I looked through my own financial disclosure statement that I filed when I joined the commission, and I think by compilation, it would get close to being what, at least in DoD, we call personally identifiable information, PII. And that has to be protected when you are transmitting that electronically. At least again in DoD world, that would require public PKI, public key infrastructure certificates so that you could encrypt email.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things, Michael, if you're going to ask IT is there a cyber unit that is available that can look at the information in the financial disclosure statement and rule whether or not that rises to the level of PII?
That's a good point, Bob.
Good.
Because regardless if you're behind a firewall, if certainly you're behind a firewall, you have audit capabilities for your computer systems and see where somebody goes. But then once that information is exfiltrated, it's gone.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Yeah, I would definitely raise that with IT when I talk to them, see what their thoughts are.
Okay, those were the two issues that I had thought about with respect to the code. I guess we're going to take them under advisement for the time being. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up before we decide whether to we need to go into a closed session? Daniel.
Right, I think based on the time, I'm not going to go through the long list I had of other possible areas to cover. Some of them administrative, but some of them requiring changes in the code. So I just mentioned one. Thanks to the work again of Gina in particular. She really did a great job, and I had asked, what do some of these things mean on the list of entities doing business with the county? And they come in all shapes and forms. And so I'll just plant the seed today and we can talk about it another time. I think there needs to be some kind of consistency and some kind of explanation on what those things mean. One of the forms, I won't mention anybody in particular, any agency in particular, but one of them had 2 columns and the columns were unrelated, which I didn't know until we got the responses back. So it creates a bit of confusion. I think that could be cleared up. Maybe we can do it administratively, but maybe having it in code would be even a better way. Let's talk about it another day, however, and that and others. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Do we have anything that we need to do in closed session? Has everybody had a chance to look over the agenda, the closed matters? And if nobody has any questions or comments about any of the closed matters, I guess we don't need a closed session.
I think Dan said he had a couple of questions. Dan, I'll be happy to address those with you if you want to call me tomorrow, or if you want to address them in the meeting, I'm happy to go into a closed session and we can discuss them. It's up to you.
I'd say, Michael, under the circumstances, if you can poll, or you or Dale can poll the group and see if they'd prefer to do it that way, that's fine with me. Or whether they want to have the closed session and hear us discuss it. Otherwise, we'll do it via email. So others want to have a meeting after this meeting or not?
Okay. Who is in favor of continuing and having a closed session to discuss? Dan, you want to tell us generically what the 2 issues are about so we can decide?
Oh, it's just a question on 4 of the
Closed matters?
closed matters, yeah.
And do you think Michael can answer them or not?
Yeah, of course he can, sure.
Okay. Well, I don't really then see the need for all of us to have a closed session. So I suggest that we go ahead. You call Michael or vice versa. And
That's fine with me. I planned to send both you and Michael an email about that, but I didn't have time for it. So we've just resolved it. That's good. Thank you.
all right. Thanks everybody for coming out, showing up at home. Rob, next time we're going to want to see your face.
Absolutely. I need to get that fixed.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for showing up. Thank you, everybody. Michael, Gina, as always, thanks again.
Okay, we need a motion to close the meeting, please.
We have a motion to close the meeting. Vanessa.
So moved.
I'll second it. My last act.
Emerson. We'll record that Emerson seconded.
That's right. That's my last act.
Last act.
Emerson leaves in a blaze of glory.
Thanks a lot, Emerson, again for all your service.
Hey, real quick, I'm just happy the commission is in good hands going forward, and it's really comforting after being here for 8.5 years, starting back when we had Betsy Dawson, God rest her soul, and to see where it's progressed to. It's I'm really happy to see it. So good luck, everybody.
All right, can we need a vote on the motion to close?
Okay, I'll do the roll. Dale, Mr. Kelberman,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Carter,
Aye.
Mr. Vandekamp,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Semick,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is carried. Meeting is closed.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be in touch after tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Aye.
Good night.
Hey.
Good night. Stay safe.
Have a good evening.